So the theme for the talk this evening is grief and the body. So the question that many people ask is, why is the body so central in the teachings of the Buddha? And the answer is that because the body is the vehicle for all our experiences. And in the sutta called The World, the sutta of the written down teachings of the Buddha, in the sutta called The World, we hear that everything happens in this fathom-long body with its perception and its mind. And in the Nibbana Sutta, the total unbinding sutta, we hear mindfulness of body is the path leading to the destination. So what is the destination? The destination is the end of greed, hatred, and delusion within your mind, my mind. So that means mind, your mind, my mind, free of these obstacles to open-hearted receptivity to the flow of life. And we are told this in the teaching over and over, the importance of the body, of referencing the body sensations, feelings, and mind states. Yet it seems incredibly difficult to use our body as a source of information, the most profound information on our subjective experience. And there appears to be some confusion that there is a higher self, what people sometimes call the higher self, that somehow exists outside the body. And I've noticed sometimes when people talk about looking for their higher self, they turn their eyes to the ceiling as though the higher self might reside outside of the body somewhere. So this is a misunderstanding, and maybe that misunderstanding, understandably arises from the word higher. The Buddha never used that word higher in that context, ever. What he used was the word ennobling. Ennobling for the practice of cultivating wisdom and peace of mind using the Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path, as it's referred to. And noble has a number of meanings, but the meaning here that we're interested in is that ennobling is personal qualities of ethics and wisdom. And so this practice is a practice of cultivating ethics and wisdom. So let's remind ourselves now, as we go along, all experience happens in this fathom-long body. Difficult feelings are the portal to limitless spaciousness. And that limitless spaciousness is available to us all the time. It's a portal to what the Buddha called the middle way. The teachings of the Buddha is to neither escape nor get caught in. So escape might be in one direction and getting caught in is another direction. If we stay in the middle way, we are not going to get caught in some sort of epic battle with difficult feelings. So the middle way is an experience of no fixed point of identity. And no fixed point of identity arises when we are not striving or trying to make something different than what it is. That we don't have to resolve it, make it better, fix it, get rid of it, or whatever agenda we may have for whatever's happening in our inner world or our outer world. But I'm talking now about the inner world because when we have clarity of mind that arises from spaciousness, the action that we take in the world around us has a lot more clarity, is non-reactive action. So it's not like we're going to not take any action in the world. The action we're going to take is non-reactive. So I'm moved today to talk about grief and the body because of a very recent experience of a body sensation that for a while was a mystery until life, as it does, conspired to reveal its name and its source. So as I tell this experience, what I'm going to do, I will name the elements of the practice according to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So this is, and the reason I'm naming it is that so you can use it in a similar way to track your own movements of mind. Whatever's happening in your mind, we call it a movement of mind. So, and this is the practice, this is how it works. So I woke up one morning in mid-April with an incredibly, a really intense sensation of heaviness all over my body. So that first foundation of mindfulness, heaviness in the body. And it was very unpleasant. All right, second foundation of mindfulness, Vedana, which is pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. So it was very unpleasant. And when things are unpleasant, there is a natural urge to escape, to get away, to suppress, or to move the attention to analysis. And all of those things shield the feeling that we don't have to feel it. So since this is 4th foundation of mindfulness, the framework of the Dharma, since all experience is conditioned by something else, it is important to remember that the experience of unpleasant sensations conditions aversion, conditions wanting to escape it. That's dependent arising. So aversion, so naturally aversion rose because it's conditioned by unpleasant. And there was, so that we just track it. It's not like it shouldn't be happening. This is what's happening. We're not getting caught in it. This is the middle way. We're not running this way or that way. We're just staying with the middle way. So there was no content. There was no storyline to this feeling. And it just was an intense feeling of heaviness. And it's at this point that one usually starts to create a story. So if you let any cracks or crevices happen in your mindfulness in that moment, then speculation is going to arise in those cracks and crevices. So we have to watch out for that. So, and creating a story also takes us away from the unpleasant sensation, as we are then distracted by mental fabrication and speculation, and which I talked about last time. So according to the teachings of the Satipatthana Sutra on mindfulness of body, I turned my attention to the sensation and observed what was happening in the mind. Her mind and body, same. So mind, sensation and mind, examining that. And there was the aversion that conditioned the desire to escape the sensation. And there was also a commitment to the Dharma, which conditioned the intention to stay with the sensation. In other words, the push and pull of desire and aversion and the action of wise intention. So there was all that happening in that moment. This practice does not change the experience, it deepens it. It deepens because one can see with more clarity the movement of one's own mind-body, as well as becoming familiar with that sensation. And that clarity also reveals the conditioning at play and the suffering. And the suffering will arise if the suffering arises through any resistance that we're having towards an experience. So when we're not resisting it, the suffering drops away. The unpleasant experience might stay there, but the suffering drops away, that overlay of the added tension of trying to get away from it, of the resistance. So through the practice of mindfulness, Through the process, the sensation of heaviness faded because all conditioned things eventually dissolve. And it dissolved into lightness and happiness. And that was followed by the many other changes that can occur in the mind-body over a day. So it's a mysterious quality of life, I find, and you yourselves have probably found it too, that when the heart opens to something, conditions in life seem to align themselves with leading you towards the deepening of that experience. And so this is the next thing that happened. I mentioned that experience of heaviness in a talk that I gave to my Women's Wisdom and the Dharma group on Zoom a couple of days later. And then we had an inquiry session. So inquiry is where someone asks a question of the teacher and we enter into a dialogue to get clear from a Dharma perspective about what's happening. So during that inquiry session, a woman talked about her experience of heaviness and feeling unmotivated to do anything. And because she, we're all online a lot because of the conditions of isolation and so on. And she was finding the incessant pressure that was coming on Facebook to do something, to bake or to pickle or to do some exercises or to do a master class or to learn a language. Or she just felt it was just too much to dance, to do exercise and so on. She experienced that as many, many shoulds. And she'd also told me that she and her partner had to close their business and had possibly lost their business. And they had no idea what would unfold for them as in work in the future when the pandemic was over. And they were in lockdown with their children, homeschooling their children. And I said to her, surely that's enough. You don't have to do a master class. And I reminded her to stay with the sensation and allow whatever was happening in her inner world to unfold, to observe without reacting, just to let it be. So the next thing that happened a couple of days after that inquiry session, I was reading a recently purchased book, which I've put up on the chat column if anyone wants the title of it, called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. And he says in that book that the territory of grief is heavy. Even the word carries weight. Grief comes from the Latin word gravis, meaning heavy, and from which we also get grave, gravity, and gravid. And we also use that word gravitas to speak of a quality in someone who are in people who are able to carry the weight of the world with a dignified bearing. And so it is when we learn to carry our grief with dignity. We have gravitas. When we learn to carry any of our emotions with dignity, we have gravitas. And so through this sequence of events that life just laid in front of me marvelously, I came to realize that this sequence of events was telling me that the sensation that I felt was heaviness, and that heaviness that I feel from time to time is grief. And grief is often quite hard to identify if it is not connected to an immediate loss, for example, of a loved one or a pet or some immediate loss. But for many of us, in between those immediate losses that we have, there is an accumulation of grief over time. For example, the loss of reasonable childhood expectations, the ordinary losses that occur in daily life, and the tragic loss of our habitat, the rapid loss of biodiversity, plants and creatures, the loss of a safe future for our children or grandchildren, and the innumerable losses that many people are experiencing as a result of this lockdown. So very important to really observe if you are experiencing grief and giving it really good attention, so that we're not going to be wallowing in it. We're using the practice of the middle path to bring ourselves into a good relationship with that emotion. So loss is a characteristic of existence, as is outlined in the Four Noble Truths. And in the first noble truth, the Buddha says that each of us is subject to sickness, aging, and death, and that each of us will eventually be separated from all that is dear to us. So he's just saying the reality of life. It is the way it is. What else is there to expect, the Buddha says? It's impossible that one could forbid anything born, existence, fabricated, and subject to disintegration from disintegrating. And at the same time as we understand this truth, the first foundation of mindfulness is a practice of recognizing and giving attention to what is arising in our bodies without pushing it away or hanging on to it. And that quite difficult emotion of grief, to be with it. And we start to let go when we see for ourselves in our inner world, when we actually experience for ourselves the birth, aging, and death of a sensation, and sensation after sensation in our bodies. You will have noticed that they arise, they're intense, and they start fading, the aging, the fading of it, and then the disappearance. You will have noticed that over and over. That is the experience of the first noble truth. And in this way, we can be with the realities of life and feel the pain of it without getting caught in the suffering. And the Buddha knew grief. He was able to speak of his grief. And he described in one sutta what it was like for him in this very simple statement when his two dearest friends died. And he said to his group of monks, who he called bhikkhus, "This assembly, O bhikkhus, appears indeed empty to me, now that Sariputta and Moggallana have died." So that was his expression of grief. And I think that, it's quite likely that there will be an increase in the murmur, if not the outright noisy thrum of grief in our lives with what we are facing at the moment. So I just urge you to give it the respect that it deserves. And it, among other feelings, will lead to the ennobling qualities that fully become you as a human being. So I'd just like to finish with a poem from this, the first Free Women that I read last time I gave a talk. So this is the oldest collection of Buddhist women's poetry from the ancient text of the Therigatha, and it's been retranslated. It's been translated in a very beautiful way. So this one's called Bhadra. So Bhadra is the name of the nun, and the name of the poem is Lucky. You always considered yourself lucky because things seemed to work out the way you wanted. Now luck has a different meaning. Lucky to be walking a path that finds peace in the arising and passing away of each present moment, regardless of how things work out or don't. So let's just have a moment of silence. So we have a bit of time for questions or comments or anything you'd like to bring into the gathering. So I think I don't know, how does this work, Loretta?